Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. I got to tell you about the experience my buddy Dave Swanson has been having on Cayuga Lake. I mention this a lot, but it's a learning experience, and what I'm about to tell you, I think is really interesting. Dave told me that last week he was fishing for lake trout, and he said he got into this area. It was 125 feet deep. I said, Dave, when you get into that depth, can you, on your graph, can you see the fish on the bottom? He said, no, not really, not at that point. But what he does is he has a jig head with a soft plastic paddle tail bait that he makes. He's got molds and makes these. And so it's about 4 inches long. He lowers it all the way to the bottom, and he watches on his screen, on his graphs. He watches it go down to the bottom. As it gets near the bottom, he said often within 15 feet of the bottom, all of a sudden he'll see a lake trout. He'll see the shape of the trout come up to look at the bait. If he allows it to continue to drop, they'll follow it down to the bottom. But often they won't hit it. They won't hit it just laying there on the bottom. So then what he does is he just starts reeling straight up. And he says he's watched these lake trout follow that bait up. He said he had one that had come all the way up to within 20 feet of the surface, and up from the bottom, 100 feet down comes this lake trout, and it didn't hit. He let it all the way back down again, and whether it was the same fish or not, he saw it following all the way up, and when it got to within 35 feet of the top, it hit, and he caught the fish. Well, one of the questions, so here's what it really tells me, that trout, lake trout, any kind of trout, they're followers. They will follow your bait for a long ways. If you're just horizontally trolling, in other words, you're not bringing it up from the bottom straight up, but you're trolling along, there's a lot of times these fish will be following you. You won't know it. You won't see them, but you might feel the tick, tick, tick of them nipping at the back of your lure, trying to see what it is, whether they want to hit it. Trout are followers, and this was such a great learning experience for me. I asked Dave one other question. I said, Dave, if these fish are coming from the bottom almost 100 feet up, why don't they get the bends? We always talk about having to fizz fish. He says, I think if they're just swimming on their own and they swim at a certain rate to do this, they're able to expel the gases as they come up. He says you can see a lot of times the bubbles on the surface as they expel the gases, the air that they're taking in this change of depth. And I found this absolutely fascinating. He also said that as he's fished more and more now on Cayuga Lake since he's moved down there, he's come to find that if he hooks a lake trout deep and he starts bringing it up, if he brings it up at a slow rate, he can actually see it be able to get the bubbles out, the air out as he's bringing it up. And he's been able to release them, and they swim away. They're great. I'm not a biologist, and I don't have all the answers here, but I think it's important that we learn from these experiences. And number one, we learn the habits of trout. But number two, we learn how these fish can go from different depths and still remain safe and not get the bends like we as divers would get if we tried to do the same thing. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.